When I found that small bottle hidden under my husband's car seat, my hands trembled like autumn leaves in a storm. The amber glass felt cold against my palm, and inside, a clear liquid sloshed quietly, carrying secrets I wasn't meant to discover. I replaced it with something stronger without saying a word, my heart pounding as I carefully positioned it exactly where I'd found it. The next morning, our entire neighborhood rushed outside when they heard Tom screaming from our driveway. But what they saw wasn't what anyone expected. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret Ellen Hayes, and at 68 years old, I thought I understood the man I'd shared my bed with for 45 years. You see, when you reach my age, you believe you've earned the right to trust in the life you've built. Every wrinkle on my face tells a story of sacrifice. Every gray hair represents a battle fought for my family. I wasn't just a wife or a mother. I was the foundation that held everything together when storms came crashing through our doors. Let me paint you a picture of who I really am, because understanding my character makes what happened next even more shocking. For 3 decades, I worked as a registered nurse in the cardiac unit at Riverside General Hospital. I've held the hands of dying strangers, comforted families in their darkest hours, and saved more lives than I can count. My colleagues used to call me Mother Margaret because I'd always make extra food for lunch, knowing someone would forget theirs or couldn't afford a decent meal. When our daughter Emma was diagnosed with leukemia at age 7, I worked double shifts for 3 years to pay for her treatment, while Tom was between jobs. I'd come home at dawn, make breakfast for the family, take Emma to chemotherapy, and catch 2 hours of sleep in the hospital parking lot before my next shift. When Tom's mother developed Alzheimer's, I was the one who bathed her, fed her, and sang her favorite hymns when she couldn't remember our names. I did it without complaint because that's what love meant to me. Our neighbors knew me as the woman who'd show up with homemade chicken soup whenever someone was sick. Young mothers in our neighborhood had my number on speed dial for those moments when their babies wouldn't stop crying and they didn't know what to do. I taught Sunday school for 20 years, organized charity drives for the homeless shelter, and never missed sending birthday cards to every person on our street. My friend Barbara always said I collected people's troubles, like some folks collected stamps, always trying to fix everyone's problems. The mailman, Joe, still tells people about the time I chased away 3 teenagers who were vandalizing his truck, wielding nothing but a rolling pin and fierce determination. The local grocery store manager, Hassan, calls me Mama M because I helped his son with math homework every Tuesday for 2 years when his family first immigrated here. These weren't grand gestures to me. They were just what decent people did for each other. I'm telling you all this not to paint myself as some saint, but so you understand that I lived my entire life believing in the goodness of people, especially the man who promised to cherish me until death do us part. That morning, as I stood in our garage holding that mysterious bottle, 68 years of trust, love, and dedication were about to shatter into pieces smaller than the glass in my trembling hands. Our mornings had become a symphony of comfortable predictability, each note played in perfect harmony after decades of practice. Tom would shuffle into the kitchen at exactly 6:45 a.m., his gray hair still messy from sleep, wearing the same faded blue bathrobe I'd bought him for Christmas 15 years ago. He'd kiss my cheek while I stood at the stove, his lips warm against my skin, murmuring, "Morning beautiful," in that gravelly voice that still made my heart skip after all these years. The coffee maker would gurgle its familiar tune while bacon sizzled in the pan, filling our home with the aromatic promise of another peaceful day together. I'd plate his breakfast the way he loved it. 2 eggs over easy, 3 strips of crispy bacon, wheat toast with just a whisper of butter, and fresh strawberries when they were in season. We'd sit at our little round kitchen table, the one we'd bought at a garage sale during our first year of marriage and refused to replace despite our children's protests. Tom would spread out his newspaper, reading interesting bits aloud while I sipped my tea and watched the cardinals visit the bird feeder outside our window. "Listen to this, Maggie," he'd say, adjusting his reading glasses. "They're building a new shopping center where the old Morrison farm used to be. Remember when we took the kids apple picking there?" We'd reminisce about those golden afternoons, our children's faces sticky with caramel, Emma trying to climb every tree while our boys filled their baskets. These morning conversations were our daily ritual of remembering, of weaving our past into our present, strengthening the tapestry of our shared life. After breakfast, Tom would help me clear the dishes, his hand briefly touching mine as we passed plates between us, a silent language of affection developed over 45 years. He'd head out for his Tuesday and Thursday golf games with his buddies from the Rotary Club, always returning by noon with stories about Bill's terrible putting or Frank's latest joke. Wednesdays were reserved for his volunteer work at the Veterans Center, something he'd started after his brother came back from Vietnam and never really made it all the way home. My days had their own gentle rhythm. Monday mornings meant water aerobics at the community center with my group of ladies, where we'd exercise for 30 minutes and gossip for an hour over coffee afterward. I spent Tuesday afternoons at the church, preparing meals for the homeless shelter downtown. Thursdays belonged to my quilting circle, 8 women who'd been stitching together stories and fabric for nearly 2 decades. We were working on a special quilt for young Sarah Mitchell, who was getting married in the spring. Evenings were our sanctuary. We'd prepare dinner together, Tom chopping vegetables while I seasoned the meat, moving around each other and practiced choreography. We'd eat on the back patio when weather permitted, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of peach and lavender. Sometimes we'd play cards or work on the crossword puzzle together. Other nights, we'd simply sit on the porch swing, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me, watching neighbors walk their dogs and kids ride bicycles until the streetlights flickered on. Weekends meant tending our garden, where Tom's tomatoes grew alongside my roses. We'd host Sunday dinners for whichever kids and grandchildren could make it, our dining room filled with laughter and the chaos of 3 generations sharing stories. Life had settled into a contentment I'd earned through decades of hard work and sacrifice. We weren't wealthy, but we were rich in all the ways that mattered. At least, that's what I believed during those precious, naive mornings before everything changed. 3 weeks before finding that bottle, the first crack appeared in our perfect routine, so small I almost missed it. It was a Thursday afternoon when Tom came home from golf, but instead of parking in his usual spot in the garage, he left his car in the driveway. When I asked why, he waved his hand dismissively and said he needed to reorganize the garage later. But later never came, and his car remained outside like a stranger refusing to come home. That Sunday after church, I found Tom in the driveway with a bucket of soapy water and a sponge, washing his car himself. The sight stopped me cold. This was the same man who hadn't washed his own car in 8 years, not since his back surgery when the doctor warned him about bending and stretching. I watched from the kitchen window as he meticulously scrubbed every inch of the interior, even getting on his knees to clean under the seats. When I brought him lemonade and offered to help, his response was sharp, almost angry. "I've got it, Margaret, just go inside." The sharpness in his voice stung. Tom had never spoken to me that way, not even during our worst arguments. I noticed his hands shaking slightly as he took the glass, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. Something flickered across his face. Was it guilt? Fear? He turned back to his car before I could decide, scrubbing at an already clean dashboard with unusual intensity. Over the next 2 weeks, more peculiarities emerged. Tom started taking his phone calls in the garage, claiming our neighbor was too loud with his lawnmower, even on days when Robert wasn't home. He'd become protective of his cell phone, taking it with him to the bathroom, something he'd always mocked our teenagers for doing. When it buzzed during dinner, he'd glance at it and quickly flip it face down, saying it was just spam. His golf schedule became erratic. For 20 years, Tom had golfed Tuesday and Thursday mornings with the same group, returning by noon like clockwork. Now he was leaving earlier and coming home later, sometimes not until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. When I mentioned this to Bill's wife at the grocery store, she looked confused. Bill said Tom's been leaving right after 9 holes lately. He assumed you needed him home for something. The drives were perhaps the strangest change. Tom had always been a creature of habit, taking the same routes he'd driven for decades. He used to joke that his car could drive itself to the grocery store, but now he was taking different roads, longer routes that made no sense. When I questioned him about why he went through downtown to get to the pharmacy, adding 20 minutes to a 5-minute drive, he claimed construction had blocked his usual route, but I'd driven that same road an hour earlier without seeing a single orange cone. Then there were the receipts. Tom had always tossed receipts in the cup holder for me to collect and file for taxes. Now his cup holder was empty, his pockets too. When I asked about a pharmacy charge on our credit card statement, he said it was just vitamins, but couldn't produce the receipt. For a man who'd kept every receipt for 45 years, including ones for 50-cent newspapers, this was like watching someone become a stranger while wearing my husband's face. The smell was different too. Twice I'd noticed an unfamiliar scent when he came home. Something floral and sweet that wasn't his cologne and certainly wasn't any cleaning product we owned. It clung to his shirt collar like a whispered secret, disappearing after he'd changed clothes within minutes of arriving home. I stood at the kitchen sink that evening, scrubbing the same plate for the 3rd time, trying to wash away the suspicious thoughts that kept surfacing in my mind. "Margaret Ellen Hayes," I whispered to my reflection in the window, "you're being absolutely ridiculous." The woman staring back at me looked tired, paranoid even, and I didn't recognize the doubt clouding her eyes. This wasn't who I was. I wasn't the type of wife who suspected her husband of deception after 45 faithful years. Tom was in his recliner in the living room, watching the evening news just like he had every night since retirement. The familiar sound of the anchorman's voice drifted into the kitchen, mixing with the clink of dishes and the steady drip of the faucet. Everything was normal. Everything had to be normal. I forced myself to remember that Tom had been under tremendous stress lately. His brother Gary had passed, away just 2 months ago after a long battle with cancer. They'd been close, talking every Sunday without fail, and now Tom had no siblings left. Grief does strange things to people, I told myself while drying the dishes. Maybe washing the car was his way of keeping busy, of not thinking about Gary. The phone calls in the garage could be about estate matters he didn't want to burden me with. Tom had always been protective that way, carrying the weight of difficult things so I wouldn't have to. That's what good husbands did, wasn't it? When Barbara called that evening to chat, she mentioned seeing Tom's car at the pharmacy again. "3rd time this week," she said with a little laugh. "Is everything all right? Is Tom feeling okay?" I heard myself laughing too, the sound bright and false. "Oh, you know how he is about his vitamins now. Ever since his doctor mentioned his cholesterol, he's become obsessed with supplements. I swear he takes more pills than my mother did at 90. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table and reasoned with myself like I was talking to one of my grandchildren. Tom was 69 years old. Men his age often went through changes, didn't they? Maybe he was embarrassed about needing new medications. Perhaps it was something personal, like those pills they advertise on TV that men don't like to discuss. The thought actually made me smile a little. After all these years, Tom still had his pride about certain things. The different routes could be explained too. We'd lived in this town for 40 years. Maybe he was simply tired of seeing the same streets. Retirement could make people restless. I'd read articles about that in the magazines at my doctor's office. Men especially struggled with the loss of routine and purpose after leaving their careers. Tom had been a regional manager for a manufacturing company, accustomed to being busy, solving problems, managing people. Now his biggest decision was which golf club to use. That night, as we got ready for bed, I studied Tom's face in the bathroom mirror while he brushed his teeth. He looked the same crinkles around his green eyes, the same scar on his chin from a childhood bicycle accident, the same way of humming while he completed his nighttime routine. When he caught me looking, he winked at me in the mirror, and for a moment I felt foolish for doubting him. "I love you, Maggie," he said, pulling me close in bed, his arms familiar and warm around me. "Always have, always will." I nestled into his embrace, breathing in the scent of his aftershave, the same brand he'd used since our wedding day. This was my Tom, my partner, the father of my children. Whatever small changes I'd noticed were just that, small, insignificant, explainable. I was creating problems where none existed, and I needed to stop before I poisoned our golden years with baseless suspicion. The morning I decided to surprise Tom by cleaning his car started like any other, Tuesday. He'd left early for golf, kissing my forehead as I pretended to sleep, and I'd planned to wash and vacuum his Honda before preparing lunch. It was meant to be a loving gesture, a way to shake off the silly doubts that had been plaguing me. The April sun was warm on my back as I opened the driver's side door, armed with cleaning supplies and good intentions. The car smelled wrong immediately. Not bad, just wrong. Like medicine and something else, something chemical that made my nose twitch. I'd cleaned this car 100 times over the years, and it had always smelled like Tom's peppermints and the pine air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. Now there was an underlying scent that didn't belong, sharp and medicinal, like the supply closets at the hospital where I'd worked for 30 years. I started with the obvious areas, wiping down the dashboard and cup holders, vacuum hose in hand. When I bent to clean under the driver's seat, my fingers hit something solid pushed far back against the mounting bracket. Getting on my knees on the driveway, I reached deeper, my arthritis protesting as I stretched. My hand closed around a small glass bottle, and as I pulled it out, my blood turned to ice water in my veins. The amber bottle was unmarked. No label or prescription information, just smooth glass containing about 2 ounces of clear liquid. My hands trembled as I held it up to the sunlight. Working in cardiac care for 3 decades had taught me to recognize medications by sight, smell, and consistency. I unscrewed the cap carefully, and the bitter, distinctive odor hit me immediately. Lorazepam, or something very similar, a powerful sedative that, in concentrated doses, could cause severe confusion, memory loss, and disorientation. My mind raced as I sat back on the concrete, the bottle heavy in my palm. Why would Tom have this? He didn't have a prescription for anxiety medication. I handled all our medications, organizing them in weekly pill boxes every Sunday night. This wasn't from any pharmacy I knew. Legitimate prescriptions came in labeled bottles with safety caps and warning stickers. This looked like something prepared by someone who knew exactly what they were doing and didn't want it traced. As I tried to process what I was holding, a piece of paper caught my eye, wedged between the passenger seat and center console. My fingers, still shaking, pulled out a receipt. Richardson and Associates, attorneys at law. The date made my stomach lurch. 2 weeks ago, when Tom had supposedly been at his monthly Rotary Club meeting. The line item read, "Initial consultation regarding estate modification and power of attorney documentation. $350. I sat there on our driveway, the concrete cold through my jeans, holding evidence of something I couldn't yet comprehend. Tom and I had updated our wills together last year. We'd sat side by side in Mr. Peterson's office, the lawyer we'd used for 20 years, making sure everything would pass smoothly to our children. Why would Tom need another lawyer? Why would he keep it secret? And what did an unmarked bottle of sedatives have to do with estate planning? A neighbor's dog barked, snapping me back to reality. Mrs. Chen was walking her poodle and waved at me. I forced myself to wave back, to smile as if my world wasn't tilting off its axis. Carefully, I photographed both items with my phone, my nurse's training kicking in. Always document everything. Then I placed the bottle back exactly where I'd found it, using my phone photo to match the precise position. The receipt went back between the seats. If Tom was hiding something, he wouldn't know I'd discovered it. Not yet. That evening, I served Tom's favorite dinner, pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes and green beans, just the way his mother used to make it. He complimented the meal, told me about his golf game, and helped with the dishes like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. As he settled into his recliner for the evening news, I excused myself, claiming a headache, and went to our bedroom. The moment I heard the television volume increase, I pulled out his phone from his jacket pocket in the hallway closet. My hands shook as I typed in his passcode, our anniversary date, the same combination he'd used for everything. The phone unlocked, and I went straight to his messages. What I found there shattered 45 years of trust into microscopic pieces that could never be reassembled. The most recent thread was with Elle, and as I read, bile rose in my throat. "Everything's in motion, honey. Just a little more patience and we'll be together with everything we deserve." The message was from yesterday at 2:47 p.m. when Tom was supposedly at the driving range. His response made my legs weak. "I've been increasing the dose like you suggested. She's definitely showing more confusion. Yesterday she called me by her father's name twice." I sank onto our bed, reading through weeks of messages, each one a dagger twisting deeper. Elle was Linda Morrison, the neighbor's daughter who lived 4 houses down. 28 years old, recently divorced, the girl whose college tuition I'd helped pay when her father lost his job. The girl who called me Aunt Maggie and brought me flowers on Mother's Day. The girl I'd held as she sobbed through her divorce just 6 months ago, making her tea in my kitchen while she talked about starting over. The messages revealed everything. Their affair had started at the neighborhood Christmas party, the one I'd missed because I was sick with bronchitis. Tom had comforted her about her divorce. One thing led to another, and now they were planning a future built on my destruction. "Once she's declared incompetent, we can move forward with everything," Linda had written last week. "The lawyer says with the medical documentation you're creating, it'll be straightforward." Tom's replies made me physically sick. He described watching me drink my evening tea, noting how the medicine was working. "She forgot where she put her reading glasses 3 times today," he'd reported proudly. "I made sure the kids noticed when they called." Another message detailed how he'd told our son Michael that I'd tried to pay for groceries twice, forgetting I'd already paid. Lies. All lies. But our children had no reason to doubt their father. The plan was meticulous and cruel. Tom had been adding the sedative to my evening chamomile tea, the one he lovingly prepared for me each night, saying it helped his beautiful bride sleep better. He'd been documenting my supposed confusion episodes in a journal, showing it to our children as evidence of my declining mental state. Next week's family meeting wasn't about planning our 50th anniversary as I'd thought. It was an intervention to discuss putting me in a memory care facility. "Once she's in Willowbrook, we'll have full control," Linda had written 3 days ago. "The house alone is worth $400,000, and you said there's more in investments. We can finally have the life we deserve, baby." Tom's response was enthusiastic, discussing their plans to travel, to buy a condo in Florida, to live off what I'd spent a lifetime helping him build. I set down the phone and ran to the bathroom, vomiting until nothing was left but dry heaves and tears. The man sleeping in the recliner downstairs, the one I'd nursed through surgery, whose children I'd borne, whose dreams I'd sacrificed my own for, he was slowly poisoning me, documenting my destruction, and planning to lock me away like an inconvenient piece of furniture while he started a new life with a woman younger than our own daughter. After cleaning myself up in the bathroom, I waited until Tom's snoring echoed from the living room before returning to investigate further. His phone revealed only part of the picture. I needed to know the full extent of this betrayal. Armed with a flashlight and determination fueled by rage, I crept to his home office, a room I rarely entered because Tom claimed he needed his private space for managing our finances. The door, usually locked, was carelessly left open. Perhaps he'd grown overconfident in his belief that I was becoming too confused to investigate. His desk drawers told a story of systematic financial betrayal that went far deeper than adultery. In the bottom drawer, behind old tax returns, I found documents for an LLC called Morrison Hayes Investments, created 3 months ago. Tom had transferred our 2 rental properties, the duplex on Maple Street and the small commercial building downtown that provided our steady retirement income, into this company. Linda Morrison was listed as co-owner with 50% stake. Properties worth nearly $600,000, which I'd helped pay for by working double shifts for 15 years, were already half hers. The bank statements made me grip the desk for support. Our joint savings account, which had held $180,000 just 6 months ago, was down to $43,000. Regular transfers of $10,000 to $15,000 had been made to an account I didn't recognize. When I cross-referenced the account number with the LLC paperwork, there it was, Morrison Hayes Investments business account. Tom had been systematically draining our life savings, money meant for our grandchildren's education, our medical emergencies, our final years. A folder marked medical contained the most sinister evidence. Tom had been creating a false medical history for me. Forged doctor's notes on letterhead from physicians I'd never seen, documenting progressive cognitive decline and suspected early-stage dementia. There were even falsified test results showing failed memory assessments. He'd researched thoroughly. The medical terminology was precise, the progression of symptoms clinically accurate. My 30 years as a nurse made these forgeries even more insulting. He'd used my own professional knowledge against me. Hidden beneath the medical folder were brochures for 3 nursing homes, with Willowbrook Memory Care circled in red. Linda's handwriting was in the margins. Private room available May 1st, $6,000 month. Medicare won't cover until she's officially diagnosed. Initial deposit required. They'd already paid the deposit. A receipt showed $18,000 paid to Willowbrook last week as a securing fee for a room. They'd literally already picked out my prison cell. The worst discovery came in Tom's email, which I accessed using the same anniversary password. He'd been corresponding with our 3 children for weeks, painting a picture of my rapid decline. "Your mother forgot my birthday completely," he'd written to Emma, though. My card for him was sitting in my craft room waiting to be signed next week. "She tried to drive to the old house again," he told Michael, referring to a home we'd never owned. To David, our youngest, he'd written, "I found her talking to your grandmother in the garden," knowing David's grandmother had died 5 years ago. Our children had responded with concern and love, offering to help, suggesting doctors, planning to take time off work for the intervention. Tom had manipulated their devotion, weaponizing their love for me into a tool for my imprisonment. There were emails between him and Michael about power of attorney documents, with our son agreeing his father should have full control for Mom's own safety. Linda was copied on several emails as a family friend and retired healthcare worker who'd supposedly been helping Tom cope with my decline. I made it back to our bedroom before the dam broke. Sliding down against the closed door, I pulled a pillow to my face to muffle the sounds tearing from my throat, raw, primal sobs that came from a place so deep I didn't know it existed. My body shook violently as 45 years of love, trust, and devotion crumbled into ash. Every cell in my body screamed with the agony of betrayal, so complete it felt like death itself. The tears came in waves, each one triggered by a different memory that now felt like a lie. I remembered Tom's face when Emma was born, how he'd cried and called me his hero. Was that real? The night he'd held me after my mother's funeral, rocking me like a child while I grieved. Had he meant it? Our 25th anniversary, when he'd surprised me by renewing our vows in front of our children, promising to love me until his last breath. Every tender moment, every whispered, "I love you," every kiss, were they all just moves in a long game I never knew we were playing? I crawled to our closet and pulled out our wedding album, my tears splashing onto the plastic-covered pages. There we were, young and radiant, Tom looking at me like I hung the moon. I traced his face with trembling fingers, trying to find the monster in that young man's eyes. When had he stopped loving me? Or worse, had he ever loved me at all? The thought made me retch, dry heaves that left me gasping on the carpet. My mind tortured me with flashbacks of my sacrifices, each one now feeling like a fool's offering. The night shifts I'd worked while 7 months pregnant because Tom had been laid off. The vacation to Hawaii I'd canceled so Tom could buy his dream golf clubs. The promotion I'd turned down because it would have meant traveling, and Tom needed me home. My father's final Christmas when I'd stayed home to care for Tom's mother instead, never knowing it would be Dad's last. I'd given him everything, my youth, my dreams, my body that bore his children, my hands that had worked until they were arthritic, my heart that beat for his happiness, and Linda. God, Linda. I pictured myself sitting at her mother's kitchen table, writing that check for her final semester of college. "You're like my second daughter," I'd told her, tears of joy in my eyes as she hugged me. She'd called me her guardian angel, the birthday cards she'd sent, the Mother's Day flowers, the way she'd cried in my arms during her divorce while I stroked her hair and promised everything would be okay. All the while, she'd been sleeping with my husband, planning my imprisonment, counting my money like a vulture circling a dying animal. I thought of my children, how they'd look at me at this intervention, their eyes full of pity and concern for their sick mother. They'd remember every genuine moment of forgetfulness I'd ever had. Where did I put my keys? What was that actor's name? Did I already tell you this story? Normal things that happened to everyone would now be evidence of my supposed dementia. Tom had poisoned not just my tea, but my children's perception of me. They'd visit me in that nursing home, holding my hand while I begged them to believe I was fine, and they'd exchange sad looks over my head, thinking denial was part of my disease. The sobs eventually exhausted themselves, leaving me empty and hollow on the floor of the closet where I'd hidden to cry. 3 a.m. Tom still snoring in his chair downstairs, sleeping peacefully while my world lay in ruins. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman I didn't recognize. Swollen eyes, blotchy skin, shoulders bowed with the weight of devastation. But as I stared at that broken woman, something else began to flicker in her eyes. A tiny spark that grew as I watched. It wasn't hope or forgiveness. It was something harder, sharper. It was rage. As dawn broke through our bedroom window, painting golden streaks across the carpet where I'd spent the night crying, something fundamental shifted inside me. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting after hours on the floor, and walked to the bathroom. The woman in the mirror looked destroyed, eyes swollen, face blotchy, hair tangled. But as I splashed cold water on my face, I heard my grandmother's voice clear as day. "Margaret Ellen, you come from a long line of women who survived worse than this. Now stop crying and start thinking." Grandma Rose had buried 2 husbands, raised 7 children through the Depression, and built a successful seamstress business when women weren't supposed to run businesses. She'd taught me to sew, to cook, but more importantly, she'd taught me to survive. "Tears are luxury," she used to say. "First you handle the problem, then you can cry about it." I straightened my spine, hearing her voice, feeling her strength flow through my bloodline into my bones. I stared at my reflection and spoke aloud for the first time since discovering the betrayal. "You're not some helpless old woman, Margaret. You're not a victim waiting to be rescued." My voice grew stronger with each word. "You delivered babies in a war zone in Vietnam. You saved lives during the hospital blackout of '89. You raised 3 successful children while working full-time. You survived breast cancer without Tom even knowing how scared you were because he was too worried about his job loss." The litany of my strengths continued as I brushed my teeth, washed my face properly, and pulled my hair back. "You know exactly what lorazepam does because you've administered it hundreds of times. You know how the law works because you testified in 3 malpractice cases. You know how to document evidence because you've written thousands of medical reports. You're not confused, you're not demented, and you're certainly not going to roll over and let them bury you alive." Downstairs, I heard Tom stirring in his recliner. The old Margaret would have rushed down to make his coffee, to start his eggs, to begin another day of serving the man who was poisoning her. But that Margaret had died on the closet floor last night. This Margaret had work to do. I walked to my craft room, my sanctuary where Tom never ventured, and sat at my desk with a legal pad. Think like a nurse, I told myself. Assess, diagnose, plan, implement, evaluate. My hand was steady as I wrote. First, I needed allies, but I had to be strategic. Our children had been manipulated. Approaching them now would only reinforce Tom's narrative that I was paranoid. But Sarah, our eldest daughter, was a detective with the state police. She'd inherited my skepticism and her father's stubborn streak. If I presented evidence, not emotions, she'd listen. Second, I needed to protect myself physically. Tom was drugging my tea every night. I couldn't simply stop drinking it. He'd notice and adjust his plan. But I could switch the cups when he wasn't looking or pretend to drink while actually pouring it into the plant beside my chair. The African violet was already dying anyway. Might as well let it serve a purpose. Third, I needed my own documentation. If Tom could create a false medical history, I could create a real one. I'd make an appointment with my actual doctor, get cognitive testing done, establish a paper trail of my mental competence. I'd also start recording everything. Conversations, his behavior, date and timestamps for every suspicious incident. You wanted a war, Tom Hayes, I whispered, looking at our wedding photo on my craft room shelf. Congratulations, you've got one. But you forgot one thing. I've been fighting battles my whole life, and I've never lost one that mattered. My craft room became my war room over the next 3 days. While Tom believed I was working on quilts for the church bazaar, I was orchestrating his downfall with the precision of a surgical nurse preparing for a complex operation. The legal pad filled with notes, strategies, and contingency plans. Every move had to be calculated, every piece of evidence bulletproof. Tom thought he was playing chess with a confused old woman. He was about to learn he'd actually challenged a grandmaster. The first call I made was to Sarah, but not with hysteria or accusations. I waited until Tom left for his Tuesday golf game and dialed her office number. "Sweetheart, I need you to come by Thursday evening before the family meeting. Bring your work laptop and that evidence kit you showed me once. Don't tell anyone, especially not your father. This is important." Her detective instincts kicked in immediately. She agreed without pressing for details, though I heard the concern and curiosity in her voice. Next, I drove to the bank where my friend Gloria worked as a branch manager. Gloria and I had known each other for 30 years. Our kids grew up together. I asked her to pull all our account records for the past 6 months. "Don't send them to the house," I told her quietly. "I'll pick them up personally." She raised an eyebrow but nodded, understanding that some things between old friends didn't need explaining. The records would show every unauthorized transfer, creating a paper trail of financial fraud. The genius part of my plan involved Tom's own weapon, the lorazepam. During my nursing career, I'd learned that vitamin B12 supplements, when dissolved, looked nearly identical to liquid lorazepam but had very different effects. Instead of sedation and confusion, high doses of B12 could cause bright red or blue urine, severe itching, and in some cases, uncontrollable hiccups that could last hours, harmless but dramatic. I carefully extracted the lorazepam from the hidden bottle, replacing it with concentrated liquid B12 I'd purchased at the health food store. The swap took less than 2 minutes while Tom showered. I also installed a recording app on my phone, one Sarah had recommended for personal safety years ago. It could record for hours, automatically uploading to cloud storage. Every conversation with Tom would now be documented. I started leaving my phone strategically placed during his evening tea ritual, capturing him, preparing my cup, adding the medicine, and commenting to Linda on speaker about my supposed deterioration. The forensic accountant was another strategic move. Dr. James Harrison owed me his daughter's life. I'd been the nurse who noticed the signs of meningitis when other medical staff dismissed it as flu. He'd told me if I ever needed anything, to just ask. Well, I was asking. I gave him copies of the LLC documents and bank statements Gloria had provided. Find every penny, I told him, and prepare a report that would hold up in court. My neighbor, Judge Patricia Coleman, retired, became an unwitting ally when I casually mentioned over fence conversation that I was thinking of updating our will. Make sure you use a good lawyer, she said. Too many seniors get taken advantage of. I agreed, then mentioned Tom had been seeing a new lawyer without me. Her expression shifted. Margaret, if you ever need legal advice, you call me. Immediately. The seeds were planted. The masterstroke was contacting Tom's brother, Gary's widow, Helen. She revealed that Tom had been pressuring her about Gary's estate, trying to claim items that were meant for the children. She'd found it odd and aggressive. I asked her to forward me those emails, adding more evidence of his greed and deception. Everything was in place. The vitamins were in the bottle. The evidence was secured. The allies were positioned. The recording devices were ready. Tom and Linda believed they were days away from victory. They were actually walking into a trap that would destroy them both. Thursday morning arrived with an unseasonable warmth that had the entire neighborhood opening windows and starting yard work early. The family meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and by 9:30, cars began filling our driveway and the street. I stood at the bedroom window watching my children arrive one by one. Emma from Philadelphia, Michael from Boston, David from Charlotte. Each car that pulled up felt like another piece on the chessboard moving into position. Tom had been adding his medicine to my tea for 3 consecutive nights, and I'd perfected my performance. I'd forgotten where I put the car keys. They were exactly where I placed them. Called Michael by David's name during a phone call, while winking at my reflection, and asked Tom twice what day it was, while secretly recording his delighted response to Linda. He was practically glowing with anticipation, confident that his children would see their mother's obvious decline and support his plans. Sarah arrived at 9 a.m., an hour early as I'd requested. I met her in the garage, away from Tom's eyes, and handed her a flash drive. Everything's on there, I said quietly. The recordings, the bank statements, the forged medical documents, all of it. Review it quickly. Her face went from curious to horrified to furious as she scrolled through the evidence on her laptop. "Dad did this?" she whispered. "And Linda Morrison?" I nodded. "There's more. He's going to drug my tea this morning to make me seem worse. When things get strange, just watch." By 9:45, the house was filling with voices. Linda arrived to support the family during this difficult time, wearing a conservative dress that couldn't hide her calculating eyes. She hugged my children like an old family friend, and I watched her touch Tom's arm when she thought no one was looking. Emma had brought pastries from the city. Michael set up his laptop to take notes for the family. David's wife kept the grandchildren in the backyard, sensing this wasn't a conversation for young ears. The neighbors had noticed the unusual gathering. Mrs. Chen was watering plants that didn't need watering. Robert was trimming an already perfect hedge. Barbara stood at her mailbox pretending to sort through mail she'd already collected. The stage was set, and the audience was assembling without even knowing there would be a show. Tom called everyone into the living room at exactly 10 a.m., his voice carrying that false concern he'd been practicing. "Thank you all for coming," he began, standing while gesturing for me to sit. "This isn't easy, but we need to discuss your mother's condition." He'd positioned himself as the patriarch, the caregiver, the long-suffering husband. Linda sat nearby, her notebook ready, playing the concerned healthcare professional. I noticed Tom had already prepared my morning tea, placing it lovingly beside me with a gentle reminder to drink up, sweetheart, while it's warm. The cup sat there like a loaded weapon. Sarah watched everything from her corner seat, her detective's eyes missing nothing. She'd positioned her phone to record, badge deliberately visible in her jacket pocket. "Before we begin," Tom said, his voice heavy with practiced sorrow, "I want you all to know how much I love your mother. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do." He pulled out his folder of evidence. the forged medical reports, his journal of my supposed episodes, the nursing home brochures. But her safety has to come first. The African violet beside my chair was brown and withering. 3 nights of my discarded tea had killed it completely. Through the window, I saw more neighbors gathering, drawn by the multiple cars and the sense that something significant was happening at the Hayes house. Tom was about to begin his presentation, confident in his victory. He had no idea that in exactly 5 minutes, his carefully constructed world would explode in front of everyone he'd tried to fool. Tom opened his folder with theatrical sadness, pulling out the forged medical documents. Dr. Morrison, no relation to Linda here, has diagnosed your mother with rapid onset dementia. He was 5 minutes into his presentation when the first hiccup erupted from his chest, so violent it made him drop the papers. He tried to continue. As you can see from these test results... Another hiccup, louder this time, his face flushing red. Tom, are you all right? Emma asked, but he waved her off, trying to soldier through. That's when the itching started. First he scratched his neck absently, then his arms, then his scalp. Within minutes he was scratching frantically, his skin turning blotchy and red. The hiccups came faster now, interrupting every word. Your mother, needs professional, care, Sweat poured down his face as he clawed at his skin. Dad, maybe you should sit down, Michael suggested, but Tom stumbled toward the bathroom. That's when the scream erupted, a sound so primal and shocked that Mrs. Chen dropped her watering can. My urine is blue, something's wrong, call 911. Tom burst from the bathroom, his pants partially undone, scratching and hiccuping uncontrollably. The neighbors who'd been casually watching were now openly staring, some walking closer to our front yard. Linda jumped up, panic replacing her calm facade. Tom, what did you take? What's happening? She grabbed his arm, forgetting to play the concerned family friend, her intimate familiarity obvious to everyone. Sarah stood smoothly, her detective's authority filling the room. Actually, Dad, we need to discuss your mental state. And Linda, you might want to sit down. What are you talking about? Tom gasped between hiccups, still scratching desperately. Sarah connected her laptop to our TV, and suddenly Tom's own voice filled the room from the recordings. She drank it all tonight. The lorazepam is working perfectly. Then Linda's voice, once she's locked away, we'll have everything. My children's faces transformed from concern to horror to rage as message after message played. The financial documents appeared on screen, the LLC, the drained accounts, the property transfers. You were poisoning Mom? David stood, his fists clenched, his wife holding him back. You were putting her in a home to steal everything with her? He pointed at Linda, who was backing toward the door. But Barbara and Robert had walked up to our porch, drawn by the screaming blocking her exit. More neighbors gathered, their phones out, recording everything. Sarah pulled out her badge and phone simultaneously. I need backup and an ambulance at 447 Maple Street. We have assault with a controlled substance, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. She turned to Tom, who was now on his knees, hiccuping and crying. Dad, you're under arrest. Don't worry, though. The blue urine and itching are just from vitamin B12. Mom switched your poison for vitamins. You've been drugging yourself for 3 days. The street erupted in chaos. 2 police cars arrived within minutes, followed by an ambulance. Tom was led out in handcuffs, still hiccuping violently, his shirt torn from scratching, tears streaming down his face as the entire neighborhood watched. Linda tried to run but was caught in Mrs. Chen's garden, tackled by Sarah personally. Elder abuse and attempted murder, Sarah announced loudly as she cuffed Linda, plus fraud and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. Emma and Michael were crying, hugging me, apologizing repeatedly. David stood guard like a protective son should, glaring at anyone who came too close. The neighbors applauded, actually applauded, as Tom and Linda were driven away. Someone shouted, "We never liked her anyway." Another called out, "Margaret, you're our hero." Judge Coleman walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. Margaret, I'll personally ensure they get the maximum sentence. What they tried to do to you is unconscionable. The entire street had witnessed Tom's complete humiliation. The respected grandfather exposed as a would-be poisoner. The helpful neighbor revealed as a home-wrecking gold digger. Both arrested while he hiccuped and ranted about blue urine. The dramatic culmination was better than anything I could have planned. The courthouse steps were crowded 6 months later when Tom was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for elder abuse, attempted poisoning, and fraud. Linda received 18 months plus deportation after serving her time. Turns out her nursing credentials were falsified, adding immigration fraud to her charges. I sat in the front row with my children, wearing the same dress I'd worn to our 40th anniversary party, feeling poetic justice in the choice. Tom looked broken, aged 20 years and 6 months, his orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his diminished frame. The divorce was finalized while he was in custody. My lawyer, recommended by Judge Coleman, was brilliant and ruthless. The judge awarded me everything: the house, both rental properties, all investments, even Tom's precious golf clubs. The LLC was dissolved, the fraudulent transfers reversed. The forensic accountant, Dr. Harrison, had found additional hidden accounts Tom had opened, preparing for his new life with Linda. Those two became mine. In the end, I was wealthier divorced than I'd ever been married. Our children rallied around me in ways that healed wounds I didn't know existed. Emma took a leave of absence and stayed for a month, helping me redecorate the house, painting over 45 years of memories with fresh colors. We donated Tom's recliner to Goodwill and bought a beautiful reading chair just for me. Michael handled all the financial restructuring, setting up new accounts and investments that would secure my future and leave generous inheritances for the grandchildren. David and his wife invited me to move closer to them, but I wasn't ready to leave my home, not when I'd fought so hard to keep it. The neighborhood embraced me as their hero. Barbara started a weekly coffee club in my honor, where we'd discuss everything from books to local gossip. Mrs. Chen taught me Tai Chi in the mornings, saying warriors needed to stay flexible. Robert helped me transform Tom's old garage workshop into an art studio where I could paint, something I'd always wanted to try but Tom had called frivolous. The mailman, Joe, still tells everyone about the grandmother who outsmarted a conspiracy with vitamin B12. 6 months after the trial, I converted one of the rental properties into Margaret's Haven, a shelter specifically for elderly victims of financial abuse and domestic exploitation. The opening ceremony drew media attention, the story of a woman who'd turned her near tragedy into triumph. We provided not just shelter, but legal aid, counseling, and financial planning. 3 women moved in the first week, each with their own story of betrayal by those they'd trusted most. Linda's mother came to apologize one afternoon, tears streaming down her face. "I failed as a mother," she said. "I'm so ashamed." I made her tea, real tea, no additives, and we talked for hours. She'd been blindsided too, had no idea about her daughter's actions. We became unlikely friends, bonded by the betrayal of people we'd loved. She volunteers at the shelter now, seeking redemption through service. The grandchildren were told age-appropriate versions of the truth. They needed to know their grandfather wasn't the man they'd thought, but also that people could survive betrayal and emerge stronger. My oldest granddaughter wrote her college essay about me titled, "My Grandmother the Phoenix." She got into every school she applied to. On what would have been our 46th anniversary, I stood in my garden planting blue roses where Tom's car used to park. Each bloom would remind me not of the pain but of the strength I'd found. My daughter Sarah helped, both of us laughing when she said, "Mom, you literally turned Dad blue with rage." The laughter felt like medicine, healing the last tender places in my heart. I was free, financially secure, surrounded by family who now knew my true worth, and most importantly, I was at peace. Today, 3 years after that morning when I found the amber bottle, I sit in my garden surrounded by those blue roses that bloom more beautifully each season. They've become somewhat famous in our neighborhood. People drive by just to see Margaret's Justice Garden, as the local newspaper called it in their feature story. The African violet that died from Tom's poison has been replaced by a thriving collection of plants, each one representing a woman who stayed at Margaret's Haven and rebuilt her life. Every morning I water them with my own hands, no longer trembling, no longer afraid. The shelter has expanded to 2 more properties, helping dozens of elderly men and women escape financial abuse and exploitation. We've partnered with the state police. Sarah heads their new Elder Fraud Division to create an early warning system for families. The Margaret Protocol, as prosecutors call it, has become a model for identifying and documenting elder abuse across the country. Last month, I testified before Congress about the need for stronger federal protections for seniors. The senator who introduced the bill said, "I was proof that survivors aren't victims. They're warriors in disguise." Tom was released last month, 2 years early for good behavior. He lives in a small apartment 2 states away, working as a janitor at a warehouse. His brother Gary's children won't speak to him. His golf buddies refused his calls. Linda was deported back to the Philippines after serving her sentence and is barred from ever returning. I heard she married a man 30 years her senior within 6 months. Some patterns, apparently, never change. I don't wish them ill anymore. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I've achieved that peaceful state where they simply don't matter to my story anymore. My children visit regularly now, not from duty, but from genuine desire to spend time with me. We've established new traditions: Sunday dinners where everyone cooks together, holiday trips where I'm no longer the one serving everyone, birthday celebrations that honor my life rather than just marking another year. My grandchildren see me differently too. I'm not just grandma who bakes cookies. I'm grandma who fought back, who refused to be erased, who turned betrayal into purpose. My youngest grandson wants to be a detective like Aunt Sarah to catch bad guys who hurt grandmas. The morning I discovered that bottle taught me several profound truths. First, that the greatest betrayals often come wrapped in familiar love, delivered with a kiss and a cup of tea. Second, that we're never too old to fight for our dignity. Experience and wisdom are weapons that only sharpen with age. Third, that when someone tries to bury you, they better make sure you're actually dead, because you might just grow roots and bloom into something they never expected. But perhaps the most important lesson is this: trust your instincts. Every woman reading this, who's noticed something off, who's been told she's imagining things, who's dismissed her gut feelings to keep the peace, listen to that voice inside you. It's not paranoia, it's wisdom. It's not confusion, it's clarity trying to break through. The red flags we ignore don't disappear. They multiply in darkness until they become the rope that binds us. Greed might motivate the wicked, but it also makes them careless. They assume their targets are weak because they're kind, confused because they're trusting, helpless because they're aging. They forget that grandmothers have survived everything life threw at them: wars, poverty, loss, heartbreak. And we didn't survive by being victims. We survived by being stronger than anyone imagined, cleverer than anyone expected, and fiercer than anyone believed possible when protecting what's ours. So I ask you, what would you have done if you'd found that bottle? Would you have confronted them immediately in anger? Would you have run away in fear? Or would you have done what I did, played the long game, gathered your evidence, and served justice with a side of poetic revenge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me about the betrayals you've survived, the battles you've won, the strength you found when someone tried to break you. Because every story of survival lights a path for someone still trapped in darkness.